Much for staying with us. Welcome back to Politics Tonight. Let's get straight to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by a chieftain of the All Progressives Congress, APC, and former Commissioner for Information in Adamawa State, Ahmad Sajoh, for discussion on judicial pronouncements and democracy in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable Ahmad.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Right, glad to have you two on Politics Tonight. Let's start this conversation with the issue of election litigations in Nigeria. Many analysts are worried that election outcomes are now determined by courts. For instance, in 2019 election, INEC recorded over 1,689 litigations from that election. And as we speak, 346 judges have been drafted to handle the 2023 election matters, while the routine cases are left unattended for the next few months. How worried are you?
Well, I am honestly not worried, and I will tell you why. You see, democracy itself is like a bridge between periodic selection of leaders and governance. And like all bridges, democracy, the democracy bridge also has its own guardrails. And if you remove those guardrails, anybody flying on top of that bridge is bound to fall into the river. So, and some of the guardrails are, of course, essentially the Constitution of the Federation, and then the electoral laws, and you know the political parties, and there are certain intangible ones like mutual tolerance between political actors. These are actually the guardrails of democracy. And if you say you want to operate your democratic system without the guardrails, we are likely going to even lose the democracy. So you have to understand that for there to be an electoral process to determine the leadership that will lead us to the governance process, it has to be done within the ambit of a law and legality. And so for as long as our political class do not want to operate within this law, that for as long as we make our political contest to appear to be so muddled up, for as long as we begin to believe that we could trample on the law and get away with it, there will always be difficulties in the manner we run our democracy. And to the best of my knowledge, the arbiter in determining whether legality was followed or legality was not followed is the courts of law. So if we reduce the intensity of legal infringements, we will be able to reduce the prevalence of court decisions in our electoral process. But you and me will agree, and I say it with all sense of worry, like you said, that there is too much infringement in the legal process. Take, for example, political parties. Increasingly, our political parties are becoming less than real, vehicles for entrenching our democracy. They are beginning to become like a mirror image of each other. Somebody just moves away from one political party to the other. And the law says, look, you must belong to a political party before you can be a candidate for an election. And if that be the case, then it behoves all of us to ensure that we first democratize our political parties, we democratize the systems. If the law says you must belong to a political party for a particular period, if I were to have my way, you cannot contest in a political party that you have not been a member for like a year. Because, look, people cannot just be hopping from one political party to the other and you expect that the democracy itself will be healthy. So beyond all of these things, we have to operate our democracy within the ambit of the law, the Constitution and the Electoral Act. The electoral umpire must operate within the ambit of the law, and that where this law and legality are not followed, it is only the courts that can determine whether the law and the legality have been followed. We do not have another option. The only thing that I believe would have really reduced this level of litigation is that if we had created a situation where all legalities would have been trashed before somebody is sworn in. You see, this penchant for people who immediately they are declared by INEC, they are sworn in, whether the election was legal or illegal, whether the election was done properly or not properly, is what makes, the litigations even become more intense. Because I contest an election, I find my way, the electoral umpire announces me legally or illegally as a winner, I go into that office, begin to enjoy the benefits of that office before then somebody takes me to court. And I think some people feel that, okay, let me just be declared anyhow, somehow, that let's meet in court. I think if we will say nobody will be sworn in until litigation.
Very valid points, because SANS have said, yes, this is desirable, but how practicable is this? But also, do you agree with those who have said, for this to end, lawyers have a duty to protect the temple of justice by refusing to take frivolous cases to court?
I think it will be very difficult for you to even determine. You see, sometimes when you use a subjective situation or word, it becomes very difficult. Who determines whether a case is frivolous or not frivolous? This is where we will begin to have difficulty in really, coining out the narrative. But let me also tell you that there is something that democracy demands, and that is mutual toleration among the members of the political class. In advanced democracies where democracy is functioning, relatively smoothly, there is this unwritten rule about mutual toleration. We have to tolerate each other within the system. But because our own is very fluid, and like I said, because you can move from one party to the other and be declared winner tomorrow, we see every loss we suffer at the polls as the handiwork of a certain level of manipulation. So we have to test the legality of the success. To say that we cannot have legal processes exhausted before elections, it was like when governors in the past, if you remember, there were governors who stayed for about 3 years before the courts removed them. And we said, look, we can bridge the time and make it within a period of less than a year for the cases to get up to the Supreme Court. I think if we are determined, we could make some of those things less cumbersome and less difficult for ourselves and for everybody, such that, if we all know that once people are sworn in, the next leg of the activities we expect from them is governance. All these issues that have to do with litigations are also affecting the governance template. They are increasing, the level of misunderstanding and lack of toleration within the political system. And again, we are a kind of people that contradict ourselves. When a situation favors us, when a judgment favors us, we hail it. We call the judiciary the last hope of the common man. But as soon as the thing does not favor us, we begin to guilt trap the judiciary, begin to feel that we were not treated fairly and that the judgment was wrong. We have to understand that, look, just like in the contest itself, that there has to be a winner and a loser, in the court of law, there has to be a judgment that favors one party and does not favor the other party. You cannot have your way all the times, and you cannot have your way all the way. So this is the situation. We have to, mutual forbearance, mutual toleration.
All right. So another concern is that courts make conflicting injunctions or rulings. Why is this happening?
It's where every Nigerian should be concerned. Every Nigerian. Courts of coordinate jurisdiction will give conflicting judgment on an issue. And you have, in situations like that, you have the appellate levels to go and get, to unravel whatever it's the conflicting decisions at the lower level. But when you get confusion also at the appellate level, it becomes more worrisome, because the temple of justice has to enjoy its own sanctity to a level that it gives confidence to whoever goes there to seek for justice. You are going to the temple of justice to seek for justice. Increasingly, with due respect to our legal luminaries and the legal profession, I think our courts are becoming increasingly courts of law, where the argument is essentially on the technicalities of law, on the prowess of the argument of the learned counsels before the judges, rather than the substance of justice itself. I think we must begin to reconfigure ourselves to see the courts as temples of justice, not just temples of law, not just a place where you argue the technicalities of law, not just a place where you show prowess in capacity to advance issue, but a place where justice will be dispensed and be seen to be dispensed to a large extent that even if the litigant who loses feels bad about the loss, but should not feel bad about the fact that justice was carried out. And let it be such that, the public itself, of course, in law, there are no room for sentiment, there are no room for emotions. It's just the law itself. And in spite of that, when you follow the law to the letter, let it be seen that you are following the law to the letter. And I think our courts and our learned counsels should also help us very seriously in reducing the amount of technicalities that confuses even the people, the ordinary citizens. Because at the end of the day, whether you are in the executive branch of government, or you are in the legislative branch of government, or you are in the judicial branch of government, the reservoir of authority that you draw from is the people of the country. And if you do not serve the interests of the people very well, you have failed in your duty as either an executive, an operator of executive authority, legislative authority, or judicial authority.
All right, so still on this, some legal practitioners have said sometimes this is so because the judge may not be aware that a similar court has made a pronouncement on the same case. And in other words, interim orders are not designed to last in perpetuity. How do you view this perception?
I must tell you that should be, but you see, the other thing is, in most cases, some of these judges are also under pressure. The lawyers that present some of these cases requesting for injunctions, and the fact that some of these injunctions are time-bound but they are forgotten, it is reality of our situation, and it's not good. It's not in our interest. I know that if a judge is not aware that a similar injunction was given somewhere, it behoves the counsels of the parties in the litigation to alert the judge that a similar injunction was given at so place, because whatever is done in the courtroom is also in the public domain. You do not operate a courtroom like a cult. You operate it like a public institution. And a public institution is an open institution. It's an institution whose decisions are made available to the public. So if the judge does not know, of course he has a lot on his table, but the counsels to the different litigants should make it known to the judge so that we do not have conflicting judgments, by courts of coordinate jurisdiction. There are cases where they will tell you that when you take the same case to two different courts of the same jurisdiction or coordinate authority, that it is an abuse of the court process. So if abuse of court process is against the law, the laws of the land, or the procedures of the legal, the courts, I mean, we should be able to point them out. What baffles the ordinary person is that we know that these laws are there, we know that this procedure, the rules of the courts are there, but sometimes they are trampled upon so openly, that people begin to wonder, where do we run to in case we have a need to be protected?
Honorable Sajoh, as we saw after the 2023 elections, many Nigerians, especially politicians, now castigate judges over unfavorable judgments. How can this be addressed?
I told you that sometimes I also wonder, and I'll give you a very typical example. First, our politicians, rather than castigate judiciary, or the public castigate judiciary or castigate each other, we must begin to learn. Something happened in 2019 in Zamfara State, where the APC was said not to have followed, laid down democratic principles as desired by the law. And in the process, APC with about 400 and something votes lost. Those votes were cancelled, and a PDP with about 100,000 votes was declared top to bottom, from governor to National Assembly to State Assembly. And that would have been, that would have raised a red flag for all of the politicians in Nigeria to now know that, look, frivolous treatment to political party affairs could affect this. But we saw it repeat itself in Plateau. The same Zamfara scenario repeated itself in Plateau, meaning the political class learned nothing. And, it's not a situation where you raise an army of people to begin to castigate or threaten to go on protest. No, just at the minimum, obey the rules as they are set out. Once you do that, you will avoid a situation of this nature. And there are many of those judgments that we are seeing, many of the upsets that we see. Somebody wins and then the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court removes the person. Most of it, you could notice that they have similarities. It's always that what went wrong here, which should have served as a lesson for us, did not serve as a lesson, and it's repeated over here again. And again and again and again, we keep making and repeating the same mistakes and pretending that we should be treated differently.
Right. But for this new trend of not just verbally castigating judges, but, openly ridiculing them on social media and uploading pictures of their family members, how can this be addressed?
I think this is a dangerous level, and this is unacceptable. Of course, naturally, these judges, must be protected, and because, of course, they have accepted to serve Nigeria at that level, their families should not be threatened because they have accepted to serve Nigeria as judges. If they are fallible, it's because they are human. You cannot assume that any human being can be infallible to the point that he cannot make mistakes, and that is why the judicial process has different levels. You have the high courts, you have the courts of appeal, you have the Supreme Court. It's all of this is in acknowledgement of the fact that the people that sit and preside over judgment, on matters of different disputes within the polity could make mistakes because they are human, and that this mistake can be corrected at a higher level up until it reaches the Supreme Court, where, the Hausa people will tell you, Kotun Allah ya Isa, that is a court after which you only leave the matter to God. We agree, but I think ridiculing judges, using the social media to post their pictures, threatening their families, and I think these things are wrong, and that if anybody perpetrates them, should be treated as far as I'm concerned, a criminal.
All right, let's quickly talk about technicalities and election litigations. How do you think this affects democracy?
Yeah, I think, you see, the whole process that gives credibility to an electoral system is its level of openness and transparency. We must begin to migrate from election as a difficult process to election as a simple, transparent, and open process. And that's where we have a problem. We've gone into electronic processes. We were happy that the amendment to the Electoral Act 2022 included electronic process of transmission of results and things like that. We should have gone, the whole hog. Go make the electoral process very clear, open, and transparent. Reduce as much as possible the human influence in it. This is why if we had, properly organized an electoral process that leverages on the new technologies available nationwide. If I can sit in Abuja and you are in Lagos and we are conversing and we are sharing this conversation with the whole Nigeria and the whole world, there's nothing we cannot do in our electoral process that would not be able to be open. And including, of course, and I say it, including diaspora voting, including mail-in voting, we can open up our electoral process such that it becomes more open, more transparent, and less reliance on individuals, who have interest in most cases. All the technicalities that you see knock out winners in elections at the court of law. If you study them very closely, you will discover that they are connected with neglect by the human person. And I also want to add that it's not enough to just say that somebody who was declared a winner was actually not a winner, he was declared wrongly. If there are
Honorable Sajoh, sadly we have to go.
Somewhere, that collusion too should be addressed. The person who colluded should be made to appear as the criminal that, aided the process of
Ahmad Sajoh, we're out of time. Sadly, we had just 30 minutes for this conversation. But I look forward to another time when we will have enough time to discuss this issue again. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've been speaking with Honorable Ahmad Sajoh, chieftain of the All Progressive Congress.
The pleasure is mine.
For information in Adamawa State. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Thank you.